Hola, ¿qué tal? Julio Monroy acá desde Delta Records. Ya había pasado un tiempo desde que no habíamos hecho lives, habían muchos viajes y bueno, muchas cosas, pero hoy traemos un gran invitado. Eh, Había hablado con él hace un tiempo para hacer un live y bueno, llegó el día, estamos muy felices. Estamos con Joel Hamilton. Entonces, aquí los dejo. Recuerden que este live va a estar 100% en inglés y bueno, aquí va. Hi Joel, how are you?
Everything is good. I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for take this time with us. And we are with David Sikara. How's it? How are you?
Hi everyone, how are you? Thanks a lot for all the people that are connecting right now with us. Joel, it's amazing to have you here. So thank you for doing this for us. It means a lot and it's a huge honor to have you here. For the people watching, remember that you can actually ask Joel questions and Julio, and you can ask about whatever you want on the comment section on the platform on which you are watching this live stream. So I leave you with Julio and Joel.
Thank you, Sik. Well, Joel, again, thank you for everything here. And I'm going to ask you a first question. Can you tell me how did you begin with music and audio engineer?
Well, for music, it was kind of all I ever really wanted to do since I was a little kid. My dad played drums in a band, and so there was like all the equipment was in the basement of the house, so I could, without them knowing, I could go down there when they weren't home and I could try out everything, like a keyboard or a guitar amp or whatever it was in the drums. And I thought that I wanted to be in bands. So I played in a lot of different bands, some that did really well, actually, and I toured all over the place, playing so many shows. The last two tours that I ever did was playing with, we were on tour with Willie Nelson, which is weird. And we went on a tour with, just basically there was a bunch of really famous people that I couldn't say no to. So I did a couple tours, but then I stopped because the thing I understood was what I was really in love with was the moment of inspiration in the studio, figuring out how to present the song and not just playing the song every night over and over and over again. It was like when we were making the records, that was when I was truly my happiest. And I started to understand that my dream when I was an 8-year-old kid was really to be a producer. I just didn't know what the producer did yet when I was 8 years old.
Well, man, that's great. So, your dad uh, played drums, and then you play drums too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you know? Do you play another instruments? Do you sing maybe?
I played guitar really, and most of the bands that I was in that did well on big labels and everything, I was a guitarist. I played guitar. I switched to guitar, um, even though I played bass, like upright bass in
Yeah.
the high school orchestra and things like this. But then I became a skateboarder. I was a sponsored skateboarder in the late 80s and the early 90s. I was actually like sponsored and went to competitions and everything. And I stopped really playing classical. And I just started playing more punk rock type of stuff on guitars, and that's how it all changed.
Oh man, I saw there's a lot of equipment behind you. Looks amazing. Do you have maybe a favorite piece of gear that you always turn on?
I have some obscure ones that I love because they're unique to me because I've used them for so many years. There's one, let me see here. Can you even see right here? Does it go over here? Yeah. You can see this one right here.
Yeah.
And this one's called the Magnatech 31B. It's so obscure. And it has a de-esser. The two knobs are de-essing and compression. And then there's the release time. But basically, this compressor was used back in the day, like if you were watching The Godfather, before digital, movies, when they were mixing movies, these were used for dialogue to get it really loud. Like when somebody gets shot and falls off a building and they go, ah, and it doesn't distort. It's because it was one of those really that they were using. And I never saw anybody else with one. And then I looked it up on the internet, and the only places that had them were like Atlantic Records and the Capitol Building in LA. Like all these huge studios had them. And that was it. I'd never seen them anywhere else. And I got it randomly. They were made in New York City in the 70s. Um, and I don't know how nerdy you want me to get about this, but it's super high headroom. Like it's 140-volt rails, so basically
Oh,
140 volts DC, even though it's FET, not tubes, and so crazy high headroom. And it's how they would get these explosions and people screaming and stuff really loud in movies without distortion, but they'd be able to de-ess the dialogue as well. But it works so beautifully as a vocal compressor. I've used it on many records. It's super obscure but beautiful box.
yeah, looks pretty amazing, man. Um,
Cool.
I have a question about this piece. Do you use it to record or to mix or both?
Oh, only to mix.
Yeah.
I'm tracking vocals. Let's say that I have some good microphone, it's an 87 or a 67 or a 251 or one of the big old tube mics. And then I'll go through a 1073, and then I'll go through a Neve 33609. Almost every single vocal I've tracked in the last 20 years has been through Neve 33609.
Okay, man. So you have a lot of equipment. I was talking with David that we all have seen a lot of this equipment in plugins. What do you think about that? That now the people has a lot of plugins and there's a lot of gear that I know is it's more expensive. But do you think that the gear or the plugins sounds similar to the gear, or what do you think about that?
I think that the variation between plugins and the gear is the same sometimes as like an old 33609 and a newer 33609. Even though they're both analog, they sound totally different. I have one of the original ones in the B room, and I have a newer reissue in the A room, and they sound different. They're both good, but they definitely, if you put them right next to each other, we would hear a difference in
Okay.
how they work. And to me, that's the same thing from the real one to the plugin. And sometimes the plugin, it's nice because you can do things like turn off the noise if they modeled the noise, or you can, choose something to make it distort a little bit more or less, like a biasing knob. Things that you wouldn't do with the analog piece. I wouldn't take it out and like rebias the transistors in the middle of a session just to make it distort a little bit more. But with the plugin, I can do that. With the UAD plugin, I can do that. Like change the headroom so it doesn't distort. And that I think is really cool. They're just different tools. I don't think that one is better or worse. They're just completely different. I mean, when I'm mixing a vocal, I'll have a fab filter EQ, and then I will have a de-esser in software, like the Massey de-esser or the Oxford de-esser that's UA. Um, but that will go out into this hardware box and then to a channel on the console with maybe a distressor on the insert, like an analog one, and the compressor that's on the SSL here. All of that will be on one lead vocal, but it's like I would never try to notch things out with an analog EQ these days. There's no reason. Fab Filter is so good at it. There's no reason why I would try to use an EQ just to take out like something annoying in the voice.
Okay, man. Yeah, the plugins are pretty amazing. I was wondering, Joel, mm, well, do you mix everything in the studio, or maybe in your home? Do you have a laptop to mix, or if you're going to travel, or always in the studio?
No, I when I'm mixing, it's always pretty much in one place.
Okay.
Like in here, actually, in the A room usually. I But recording, I'll do it anywhere. I'll bring a
Okay.
laptop with like an Apollo and do vocals in somebody's garage. Like, I don't care. But the mixing part, I need to come back to where I feel like I have the colors and the options to get things happening in the way people would expect if they're actually hiring me to mix it, you know? And it's not just the equipment, it's more just the listening environment. Like, even if you took the console out of here and I mixed it in the box, I'd at least be in my environment. And I like that because I can. If it changed, I would mix it somewhere else. But right now, I can do it here.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Well, and talking about the trips and everything, you have been a lot of times here in Colombia,
Hmm?
in Bogota. Yeah.
Hmm?
Um, you come here to with artists to record, highly suspect, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that experience recording here in Colombia and everything?
Yeah. I mean, I've done that twice with bands from the United States, but I've recorded bands from Colombia there a lot
Yeah.
also. But the two times that I brought bands from the United States, one was from Texas and one was from New York. So Highly Suspect is from New York, and then the a band called Oceans of Slumber, which is more metal. Uh, but I brought them both to Audiovision, and I mean, I love that city. I love Bogota a lot, and I have for a lot of years now. Um, so I know that the bands that I bring there will feel that energy also. Um, it's been inspiring for us every time that we're there. Not only because it's somewhere different, because I've been to cities all over the world and worked in studios all over the world, but I want to go back to Bogota because there's something that is inspiring about the way that city works. It's difficult without being cheesy, like, I don't want to just say like it's the food or it's the people or it's this or that, all the shit that people say when they travel. But really, it's like it's more than that. Like, there's some amazing musicians there. There's I The energy that has come from people really making a music scene in the last 15 years, 20 years, like, where there was really not so much of an underground music scene, there was not so much of an alternative music scene. Like, it's one thing if you're Vives or some shit, you know what I mean? Like, Carlos Vives he was fine, but not if you sounded like Fugazi or like a punk band, or you sounded like Telebeat, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, something that's not just only on the radio vallenato, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like Charles King can do it, but not so much with, like, a rock band. And there's something about that energy. Like, there's an excitement there from the scene really growing and becoming stronger all the time. Like, people taking so much pride in making festivals, and I don't know, just a lot of bands, man, started to pop up. So coming there, I really like the room at Audiovision. I like the Neve at Audiovision, and I work on a console, so that really became my only choice. Honestly, I did something at when it was still called Loop. I did,
Yeah.
it's Arbol Naranja now, but it was Loop, and we brought in a small console, like a mixer, just so I could monitor on it while we were recording, because they have great equipment, they have a good room, everything about it. I love Pedro, I love Paula, I love everybody who works there, and but without a console, I felt like I had one hand tied behind my back.
Great,
So
thank you. Yeah,
yeah,
continue.
man. No, please,
I
please.
was I was actually curious about something. I see that you have recorded with a lot of bands, with a lot of artists, and you have recorded a lot of different music genres. So I think it's pretty interesting to know what do you think makes a great recording. I know music it's really subjective. So what do you think it's a great recording? Must have.
See, I don't think that music is that subjective. I think that
Okay.
what makes I think that what makes a great recording is something that gives a clear window to the intention of the composer or the band. And when we use the compositional intention as the guiding force behind every single decision, amazingly it's not very subjective. It's the same way that there's rules to a language, right? And so I can't just make random noises with my face like and expect you to understand me. I have to use the rules of the English language or the Spanish language or whatever language we're speaking, and then within those rules I can choose whatever word I want to choose, right? So but there's certain things in music that actually have to be, or not have to, that usually lead to a better result when you stop thinking about it like it being completely artistic, like, oh, we can do anything, bro. And when people say that, I'm always like, okay, so I can put the faders at any level and it's going to be equally as good. Like, obviously we know that's not true. Like, certain levels are going to sound better than other levels, and when we figure that out, all of a sudden subjectivity seems to magically start to drain out of the room. um, I think a great recording enhances the initial gesture. So whatever the band is, whatever the, not even the band, whatever the song is saying needs to come through the speakers I'm pointing at speakers you can't see, needs to come through the speakers when I record something. It goes from being people in the live room, and then it becomes a two-dimensional representation in the speakers, right? It's no longer a band, it's no longer a person, it's electrical impulses that are representing what they did in the live room. And just like in a movie, we use something representational to tell the story. Like, think of it this way: if we were going to make a movie today, we decided this, and we're going to show that there's a guy waiting at the train station for their friend, and the friend is really, really, really late, and it's like hours are going by. We don't just make the movie 6 hours long. What we do is we show the clock, or we use some old stereotype that they've used a million times in movies to be representational. Like, then they show within 30 seconds they're going to show the clock at 12 o'clock, and then 6 o'clock, and then 8 o'clock, and show that 8 hours has gone by and this person has been waiting all day. It's the same thing in music, where we're not actually using a snare drum anymore. We've got this representational sound coming out of the speakers, or a representational sound of a guitar or whatever it is, and we need to represent sad or beautiful or angry or love or hate or any of the things that are actually being transmitted. The idea is what's behind the representation. We're no longer dealing with the sounds in the live room, we're dealing with telling a story.
Okay, man. And
Thank you.
how
Thank you.
how, how do you decide when a song is all done? Like
When I
like
forget about the console and I start,
yeah.
everything sort of falls away and I'm just listening, and the experience never snaps me out of the story. Like, if you were editing a movie and you're like, the story just is seamless, right? The story just goes and goes and goes, and you never stop to think, that should be shorter, or I should, like, zoom in on his face because he's going, and I need to show that he's doing this. It's like, if everything just feels right and the story continues without making you think about the process. Once I stop thinking about the process and I just hear the original idea coming through and touching my heart instead of engaging my brain, then I know that we're on the right path.
Okay, but taking into account what you have tell us about the technical aspects, highlighting stuffs of the creative process. What do you think is the relationship by adding, for example, creative aspects on the mix or on technical aspects? How's the relationship on the creative process, not the mixing or the recording, but maybe on the creating process, which are these technical relationships.
Sure. I think what's interesting is when we can compartmentalize, we can make two boxes, right? And one box is intra musical and one box is extra musical. And what those two things mean, intra musical is anything that you can put in the sheet music. If I could write out the score, so it's an Eric Satie piano piece, and it gives all the notes and it gives the tempo. It tells you that it's a piano. It gives you the range, everything, dynamics, everything is on there. But guess what? It never says the RT60. It doesn't give you a reverb time to place on this, even though we can assume it would be performed in a concert hall with something like 1.8 seconds of reverb, right? But it doesn't give you that. So if I put reverb on this piano piece, I'm making an extra musical decision. It lives outside the composition, but it enhances the composition because it's me presenting what's actually on this sheet music in a space that tugs at your heart more because it feels like church or it feels like a concert hall instead of sounding like a dry live room with moving blankets, blankets on it and microphones really close and headphones and a click track, you know?
And for example, I was wondering, well, you have worked with a lot of artists, yeah, and each artist is different, yeah.
Mhm.
So how you adapt to workflow to meet the unique needs for each project?
It's a really good question because if I'm recording Paul McCartney compared to a metal band in Bogota, obviously it's a different process. It feels like a completely different universe, right? And honestly, I feel like this is going to get like psychologists now, but if you get your own ego out of the way, like it's not about how I do it, it's about how it needs to be done. So it's like, what does this song want? And when I understand the pace of the song and you start to understand the people in the room, like, it's the same thing as like, even if you have two different pieces of meat, they're going to cook slightly differently. You know what I'm saying? Like, you
Yeah,
need to be like, a chef can't just say, okay, this is 5 minutes. No matter what, it's 5 minutes, whether it's this thick or this thick, a piece of meat. It's like it changes everything about the preparation to get the most out of it, the most flavor, the best presentation, everything. And for me, it's really listening to everything that the band says. If it's a band, everything that they say to each other when they walk through the door, I'm listening. Like I hear the drummer say, I'm just worried that that one fill that we worked on or some shit. It's like, pay attention to all of this and understand, like, okay, the most nervous one in the band is this. So then I start budgeting time for getting that song correct. Or I talk to them before we start and I say, okay, getting this song correct is really, we're just going to do takes and then we'll comp together the best fill. So you don't have to try to make it the performance of a lifetime
yeah,
on this first take. Like, just relax. Things like this, it sounds so simple, but it's amazing how much we read each other, right? We're human beings. So if you and I were walking down the street and I saw you start to like look straight ahead and you look a little stiff or whatever, and then I noticed that there's like some weird guys up on the corner, it's like I only looked because I saw you like go, you didn't say anything, but you read the body language. It's body language, man. When people walk through the door, you understand, like, okay, the bass player's nervous. They've never made a record before. We need to make them feel okay, because the best microphone I've ever used in my life is the one that is in front of somebody who feels comfortable and feels like they can do their best in your studio.
yeah, I understand. And for example, talking about that maybe a musician, uh, it's new in recording, yeah, maybe the drummer, it's their first record. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to replace the musician?
I've been in a place where I wanted to and probably should have, but the only time that I've ever done that is when there's more than one drummer hired for a project,
Yeah.
and they're like, one is sitting on the couch and the other one is recording, and I just say, you know what, let's just go with this other thing. We're gonna skip this song and go to the next one, and then we come back to that song with the other drummer. But never like I've never like kicked anybody out or hired somebody else, on the spot. It's like, I think that pre-production is important here, like, because it's not a surprise then when somebody shows up. Like, by the time I was far enough in my career that I could have fired the drummer, let's say, I was also far enough along in my career to make sure that we had meetings beforehand and had a pre-production rehearsal or something, so I could go, oh, okay, we should really get somebody to play these bass parts, and then you can go back to being the live bass player or whatever. And I would talk to the primary songwriter. I would communicate before just freaking out and going, oh my God, now we're in the studio that costs a lot of money for everybody to be here, and we're wasting so much money and time and energy with somebody who's not going to get it right. We figure that out before.
Yeah, man, that situation is very mm, weird, and it's not very good for her.
No, I just think it's more professional to avoid it entirely, because if
Yeah.
it's the primary singer paying for it, or it's a label or whoever's paying for it, they don't want to pay for you not making a decision. Like, for me, I always remember that there's more compassion and more love and respect for the band for me to make a decision quickly and not waste their time or energy or money. We could be making a better record with respect.
Man, and I was wondering, I saw a talk of you. I told you, like 15 years ago, or maybe at Maloca. Yeah,
Yes,
and I remember a thing that you told us about having an equipment that represents your sound, or something that is only in your productions. Yeah.
yeah,
Maybe, are
yeah,
there any unconventional recording techniques you have used that surprise you with the results, or
definitely.
unconventional equipment that you can tell us a little story?
Definitely. I mean, I have you're not gonna be able to see it. It's way over here, but there's like an old, wait. There's like, right, oh, can I do this in a mirror
Yeah.
image? Uh,
Yeah.
so right there, the silver thing right there, that is, it's a harmonizer. It's an old Digitech harmonizer, and it's like 12-bit, and the input is analog, obviously, like analog in and out, but there's like no latency, because back in the day nobody would accept latency, like in a guitar effect. Obviously, like, if your pedals had latency, you'd be like, what the fuck, this thing's trash. So it's like, there's no latency, and it's a pitch shifter, and I love it, love it, love it on the snare drum. It makes any snare drum sound like the Lin drum. It goes like, like it distorts and pitches it down like a fifth or an octave, whatever is appropriate. And it's amazing to me how much that, as like a distortion box on the snare, it sounds great. It doesn't sound distorted or angry. It doesn't make everything sound like Nine Inch Nails or whatever. It's like you can still use it in a rock record. And I've used that thing on a million drums. And I mean, that's the type of thing where it's like, it's supposed to be for making harmonies, like fake harmonies on a vocal, or pitch shifting a guitar in a rack. But it works so well on drums. Like, I love pitch shifting the snare drum, especially when there's like a note in the snare that doesn't work really with the key of the song. I'll make three different pitches on the snare drum, so that the center frequency becomes arbitrary. Instead of it going poo, it just goes poof. and you can't really pick out any one note. It just sounds like harmonics all over the place. Um, that type of thing for sure. It's always got something to do with distorting some old shitty piece of gear. Seems to be the thing that surprised me when it works really well, even in a clean song, like something that you don't interpret it as aggressive or distorted. You interpret it as just like these rich harmonics and density to a sound in the drums or a density in the bass.
Oh man, thank you. I was checking my notes from that talk. I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if Sig, can you share them? Um,
Yes, give me a second.
I was checking because look at them. July 20, like more than 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, a lot of things that you're talking us you're saying again, and I like that because uh,
It's still
I
true.
yeah, it's still true. But one of them is said saying that it's better to do something that uh, stay in the chair without creating nothing. You know that you told that in at AES in New York,
Yeah.
and you said
Yeah.
that it's better if you have an internship, for example, or an assistant. It's better that that person, I don't know, moves the microphone or makes or do something, and not stay all the time like this, waiting. Hey, what do I have to do? Please tell me. Uh, what do I
Yeah.
have to do, Joel? So, based in that, do you have more uh, advices for students and the new people who are entering to this new audio engineering world?
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
you
I
have a lot
know.
of experience, so we have
Yeah.
to ask you a lot of.
Yeah. And the thing that I said, I remember what I said because I've said it so many times in the studio for people where I said, the only thing that we cannot do in the studio is nothing. We
Yeah,
can do something, we can do something else, we can do it again, we can record over it, we can delete it, but we can't just sit here doing nothing. Like, and I try to tell people to l- look at that. Look at what I'm doing all day long when you're an intern at Studio G. I'm doing something. Like, and that's a big lesson. You know, it sounds really simple, but it's a big lesson. I'm never just doing nothing. And it's not because we're running out of time, even on a session where we have tons of time. It's like, let's try something. If the band goes to, you know, get a snack or walk around the block or something, that's my opportunity to like tweak the kick drum or like, you know, twist a few things into place and try like a longer reverb on the guitar or turn the reverb off on the guitar, just whatever, like try shit, because then they come back from their walk and you're like, check this out, and you hit play and it feels inspiring, like, wow, that's a new perspective on the same thing. It's like I looked at it from a different angle while they were out of the room, but I'm not going to waste their time when they're trying to do takes out in the live room by going, hold on, I have to look at it from over here and then over here, and then I got to do this and then I got to do that. It's like you're going to have these little breaks where people like they need a break or the drummer wants to go to the bathroom, anything. And during that time, use that moment to do something. And when I see uh, interns starting to maximize the time in the studio, I understand that they get it. You know, I understand that younger engineers get it when it's like, okay, now I've got 3 minutes. I'm going to just like organize the tape boxes over here next to the tape machine so that when Joel comes back to like find the reel, it's going to be all, they're all sitting the same direction and we can read the edge of the box. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like I'll clean up the clipboards with paper on it because they've been making notes. or anything, just some little thing like this. It's like, that's how you maximize the time. And again, there's always an analogy, right? And it's again the same thing. Like, if you have a car that works just fine. It's never going to win in an F1 race because they've taken every single opportunity to maximize every single detail about an F1 car. It's not just to go to get to the supermarket. It's like, this thing is maximized to go fast, to go around corners. That's what happens in a professional recording session. But it's time. Every second is maximized to do something better than someone else. That's how we make something that gets on the radio. That's how, when we put in that type of effort, I see bands, when I first saw Highly Suspect go above Green Day and above the Foo Fighters and above all of this, and they were #1 on the rock chart. I was like, that is because we took every second and we used every second to make it better, 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 better. We knew what the goal was, and we kept going right towards the goal again and again and again and again, and didn't waste time.
Thank you, Joel. I actually want to take some time to read some comments. So we have Alan Elna says hi. Jorge Asama as well. Regards, Julio, David, and Joel. So hi, Jorge. Thanks a
Hi,
lot for
Jorge.
being here. We also have hi, Joel. Cheers from Natalie Castro from Antelope Audio. So thank you. Also, Alex Sanchez, the man. That wall is crazy. Also, from us to the world says hi. Jorge Asama says Joel and Studio G Brooklyn rules. We actually have a comment here from Alex Sanchez. He's telling us, Joel, let's talk about Metal Zone.
Oh yeah, please. I'm all about the metal.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Metal Zone?
I just love that pedal. I have every version they've ever made of the Metal Zone. I have the Wazacraft version. I have the 30-year anniversary version with the like black and gray. It's different colors. I have the original. I have the reissue. I love that pedal. Even for things that are not metal, I really love that pedal. I've used it on drums. I've used it, just on bass. I've used it on probably everything. Whirly, Rhodes, keyboards, everything. And the EQ is insane on it, like truly insane, low and high, and then a sweepable mid EQ. And so it's funny, like if it wasn't called Metal Zone and it was just called the most flexible distortion pedal in the universe, people wouldn't be like, you can't use that, it says metal on it, But instead, like, I've played in bands. I played on a tour with Willie Nelson where I had a Metal Zone on my pedal board, but with the drive turned all the way down and the mid scooped out, and it just pushed the little amp I was using a bit more because the line amp is so strong on that thing. You can distort like a Fender Princeton, and it sounds like country, but just with a little grit to it. So anyway, I'm a fan. Come on, boss. If boss is watching, you need to give me a boss endorsement. I've been pushing pedal for 35 years.
We're going to make a reel about about
The Metal
everything that you
Zone.
told us.
The Metal
Yeah,
Zone, yes.
and we're to
And we'll tag them.
boss.
Documentary.
We also have Hey, Just Getting Home by Juan Carlos Sotelo. And Andrea Navarrete says hi as well. For the people watching, remember that if you've got any questions, you can ask them on the comment section and I will ask the question for you.
And I'll answer it with a really long answer.
Sorry?
And then I'll answer it with a really long answer.
No, it's been okay. It's been fine. It's been fine.
I
actually
have a question. Okay, go Sick, and then I will go.
I feel really intrigued about the studio setup because I know it's a huge studio. You have a lot of gear. How do you like you prepare a setup before recording a specific song or in a specific band, or sometimes you just improvise on the way? How do you set up and prepare the studio for a recording?
If I'm the engineer or just like as a studio?
If you're the engineer.
If I'm the engineer, I will have done some sort of pre-production meeting so I know what I'm going to be recording. I know that it's drums and bass or it's synth and guitar or whatever, whatever we're doing that day. And I will have basically everything on stands, or the drums that I know that we're going to use. I'll have them already kind of set up, meaning I know there's going to be a snare and a kick and some toms and some cymbals. And when the drummer gets there, they'll adjust the places, and then we'll aim the mics. But really, it's like the studio is large, and it's a lot of shared microphones. There's a mic locker that's for all the rooms upstairs, and there's a mic locker that's for all the rooms downstairs. And so we have these things that it's almost like a shopping cart, that you push down the hallway. It's carts with like these shelves on them, and you get all the microphones you need, and then you bring the rolling cart into the live room. So that's what we work from, is just having a cart that you can pull next to you. It's actually very efficient to have the whole cart of microphones right next to you while you're doing the drums, because you don't have to keep walking all the way across the live room and back to go get the snare mic and then go back and get the overheads and all of this. They're just right next to you while you're working. So we'll have microphones on stands, and besides that, we might even wire it up, meaning get it patched to mic pre's and things like that, but not final placement. And then we have final placement afterwards, like once the band has gotten comfortable. Is that what you mean by setting up, like physically?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the question. And
Yeah, right.
for example, how do you feel the the recording studios are going to change with the development of technology, and taking into account, for example, that Dolby Atmos is becoming really popular, so studios have to actually adapt to Dolby Atmos, and now that we have artificial intelligence, how do you think all these technologies are affecting recording studios?
It's interesting because this Studio G last year, 2023, we celebrated 30 years of being Studio G, 1993 to 2023. So we've seen things evolve like crazy, from only tape to like tape with ADATs, like digital but on tape still, and then tape going away, and Pro Tools, and all the things we all know, but lots of different sections in the timeline. And each time people were like, well, that's the end of recording studios. Now that Pro Tools is here, you can do it in your bedroom. It doesn't matter. Like every time there was a change, people were like, well, that's it. I guess we can burn down the studio because it doesn't matter anymore. And what's interesting is, if I had to make a chart with recording studios, all of this stuff happening, like all the technology that's come along, is like a foundation that pushes the studio up rather than something that buries the studio and pushes it down. Like when Pro Tools started to be everywhere and GarageBand started to ship with laptops and everybody had a way to record, all it did was make the recording studio aspirational, meaning the same way that, like, eventually if there's a car you can buy that only costs $1, it's not going to make a Ferrari any less desirable. And so if you're already working like with top of the line gear, amazing tape machines, all the great mics and all of this, it actually pushes it up, because more people know that this is a goal. Like, someday I want to record in a real studio. And not everybody, of course, but I'm saying it's not like this pile that is pushing down on the studios. And we knew that we had to provide an experience rather than just like getting it done, because back in the day you would book 2 hours for somebody to just do vocals or whatever. Now it's like people come from out of town. They really want the experience of like trying out all the mics or trying vintage synthesizers, or just the experience of using analog gear is it's exciting, because it's how a lot of the people back in the day, it's how everybody did it. And I think there's something interesting about that. Like, there's something about the experience of making a record and feeling more professional. Like, if you take a picture of me with your phone, we're all just sitting there, it doesn't matter. But if you have a large format film camera and we've only got 10 shots, everybody's going to sit up a little straighter and make sure that their shirt is straight, and like check their hair and figure out if everything's cool before you actually push the button. And I've found that to be true, like with a tape machine. I'm pointing at shit you can't see, but there's a tape machine. And so basically there's something about that, and there's something about this is separate from AI. Like when you're talking about the AI aspect of it and Atmos, which is in every single conversation about recording studios now, every time somebody talks about AI or Atmos. Atmos, we outfitted one of our mixing rooms, a small mixing room here, with a full Atmos mix system, and it's really fun. And I got to mix some really crazy stuff for Hans Zimmer that goes all over the room, and I got to mix the Leve. It looks like Laufey. I got to mix the immersive mixes for her record, and that record won the Grammy this past year. And that one was so simple. Like I barely moved anything. Like the orchestra just has a little bit of height and width, and she's still like right in the middle. And Atmos is fun, but I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball about whether it'll still be here in 5 years. And then AI is funny because it's like an acceleration of a phenomenon that's already existed. If you went to Nashville, there were teams of songwriters, New York, Nashville, LA, teams of songwriters that just basically are like listening to everything on the radio, and then they go in the studio every single day and they write some bullshit song that sounds exactly like a cross between Taylor Swift, a Disney movie, and whatever, you know what I mean? Like an ad for toilet paper. And then somebody sings it who's good looking and they put it on the radio. It's like that type of shit has existed forever. But AI is now accelerating that process. And unfortunately, the people who are writing these things, they're losing their jobs, but it's not like ruining music. What's ruining music is a bunch of humans writing shit on their own to try to maximize their position in a fucking playlist on an algorithm based streaming service. Not because the streaming services are evil, but because it's fucking up everybody's brain. Like they have to serve the master that is the algorithm. And so there's nothing that sounds like Tom Waits. I mean, this sounds so boomer, but meaning the differences of the artists back in the day. You hear like one measure of a song by some old rock record, and then one measure of a song from a different band, and you know it's the Who and then the Beach Boys or whatever. And even if it's fucking cumbia, even if it's like an old Discos Fuentes record, every one of their artists, it's like you don't confuse Fruco with like somebody else. You know what I'm saying? Like they all had their own identity instead of just being like everybody's trying to sound the same. So you get on the like global pop 50 fucking, uh, uh, playlist. And to me, that's the thing that is more dangerous than AI. Imagine using such a powerful tool as AI for like a really interesting song instead of just to make like a bullshit country song for top 40 radio. Because I already don't care about the bullshit top 40 country song. So I don't care if a fucking robot made it or some dude from Alabama made it with a fucking cowboy hat on. Like, I don't care. It's still the same bullshit song. And so weirdly, like we have all these really powerful tools and everybody's just using it for the same shit anyway. The same shit that like bands are writing because they feel that's the only way to succeed. And really the big secret is that having your own identity is actually how to succeed instead of just making some bullshit copy of everything that came before you. Anyway, I had a lot of caffeine today.
No, that was great, and I think what you're telling us, Alex. I've seen your question. I'm gonna ask Joel your question in a second. I think it's really important what you're saying because you're talking about authenticity and well, I think there's a relationship between authenticity and artistic value. But as a composer, for example, there is something really important that I have noticed that you do on a technical aspect, which is, for example, you highlight the value of the song. And there is something on the creative process that has a huge impact, and it's why you're writing that song. And while you're writing that song, you have to, for example, if you're composing for a movie or anything like that, you have to highlight the emotion. If you want to make like a really kick rock song and like this rock song that people uses to the gym and they feel like really motivated and you feel motivated in making the song, that actually has a lot to do, a message for this artist you're talking about. You have
Hmm.
to really know the context on which you're gonna be heard, and that's the way on which you can actually enhance authenticity because you have a goal and you have a place to go, and it will help you be authentic by having references because having references is important, but not
Hmm.
copying the references. I just wanted to make that little comment right there.
Well, no, but it's a beautiful comment. The some I've said before that's beautifully articulated. I've said before that sometimes producing is just manipulating the context that people will experience the work in, where it's like you just guide the project towards a place where it's going to be appreciated. It's like you're not even just changing anything other than how people are going to listen to it. You know, how people are going to consume that stuff. It's like if somebody has a record that's only solo violin or something, like by themselves just playing
Yeah,
alone, and you put the, you know, just a little bit of like weird delay in one of the things, or you put a little bit of obviously artificial reverb so it sounds like they're in a missile silo or, you know, a giant space. It's like immediately that could be used, that could be interpreted as something more modern than just
yeah,
kind of like the same old violin performance in a classical recording. Like if you recorded it like just straight a purist recording, it'd be like, okay, now there's one type of person who's going to listen to this, and it's people who listen to classical, and they're going to judge it weirdly because it's not old compositions. You're not playing anything from one of the dead composers that they listen to only in the classical world. It's like you're doing a modern compositional record that now has something that's almost like it could play after a Brian Eno song. And people would go, wow, this droning, slow, beautiful thing sounds like it should be used in a French film when somebody dies. And it becomes an emotional experience that's outside of the original presentation, which is just kind of like being compared to Bach or Beethoven or Holst, or you know what I'm saying? And all of a sudden you're being put in a category with Eno, or, you know, obscure drone you know, like ambient music, you know, things like this. And you could be at the top of a playlist that's for like ambient chill out music instead of at the bottom of some modern composers playlist that's got all these like Harry Parch and later modern composers in it. And so it's amazing that like just, but all that takes, it's not marketing, it's the sound of it, the texture and the way that you're presenting it to the world. It says, I'm not just a classical violinist because I'm using some electronic sounds around the edges that don't cloud my original message, but they let the listener know we're not just stuck in an old box of classical here, you know? And if that's
yeah.
appropriate,
Yeah.
obviously, only if appropriate. But it's amazing how that's just one example of manipulating the context that people will interpret your music in.
Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic.
And I have a question before the Alex question. And
Okay.
this is a very difficult industry, you know. And how do you stay inspired after years in the music industry? For example, I know there's a lot of people who are in this industry, and then a few years later, they and begin to do something. What could be a good advice for the people to stay inspired, because this is very hard. This is pretty hard.
Hmm. I think being honest with yourself, if it's something that you truly, truly love, it makes it a little easier to
Yeah,
stay inspired. Because if you really, truly love it, like it's not just fun for a couple days and then you give up. I mean, there's a lot of hobbies that are fun for a little while and then you're like, okay, that was cool when I was 16, but now I got to get a real job. It's like if you, it's, you know, like people say artists do it because they can't do anything else. You know, a real artist does it because that's all they can do. Like it's what you're driven to do from your heart and your brain and your soul, and then it gets expressed out through your hands and your mouth and your, you know, everything you do. if you're one of those people like I am, it feels every single morning is another opportunity to do something cool, to do something interesting, instead of feeling like every single day is like another pain in the ass to just try to
Yeah,
try to figure, oh, okay, how am I going to get famous today? You know, it's like if that's your whole goal, I feel like that starts to be poison in your veins, because then it's never going to feel fast enough. You know what I'm saying? Like people are
yeah,
always like, fuck, man, I'm working so hard every day and still no label is recognizing my genius. But it's like if every day you make something, it's amazing to start to look back. It's kind of, you know what it is? When if you put like $1 in a box every single day, it's only $1, and then at the end of 1,000 days, you got $1,000. And so it's, I
that's
mean,
right.
it's one of those things that it never feels exciting in the moment, you know, like, but then you start to look at what you've got after all these years, and you're like, wow, this little tiny decision that I made 10 years ago, I still love hearing that one little thing in the background of that chorus of that song or whatever. Um, I think that inspiration sometimes comes automatically, but you got to create a space to make sure, like in your brain, in your heart, you got to create a space to allow it in. It always sounds religious when I say this shit, but it's kind of like allowing yourself to create something that's not going to be judged, that doesn't have to go immediately on fucking SoundCloud, that doesn't have to immediately be played for your friends. It's like your creativity, it's like a muscle, so you just, if you keep working it, you get better at being creative the more you create.
Thanks, man. Thanks. That's real. If you put $1 and then in 30 days you're going to have $30, and then yeah, that's true. I like that. Thank you.
And it, but it doesn't feel like a big deal when you put $1 in the box. You're just staring at it and it's $1. It's not that exciting. But knowing that it's the beginning of a process that does actually lead somewhere, it's powerful. Eventually it's powerful.
Thank you, man.
And for
Very inspiring.
example, I guess that you have contact with artists that have both like this huge ego and thirst of fame, and people that are legends, really.
Mm-hmm.
So we do as well. Well, not that big of a legends, but but I think that it's funny because the most successful a person is, I think it's like more human and actually wants to help other people. And we are all about giving our lives to other people because we create stuff, we create music, we work
Yeah,
on
that's
films.
true.
So we actually work really hard to entertain you, to help you pick up the person that you like on school and send them the song, or maybe sing the song for the other person. And I think that's a huge, huge element on becoming successful, and it's the human intention. If you're creating art for your own good, nobody's gonna listen to your art. But if you actually do art for other people, you using yourself as the first filter. That's important because if you don't like the song, then probably no one will. But um, I think it's more about human intention. We're giving our lives to entertain other people and to help them create emotions and communicate with other people as well. So that's something that's really important. And all the people that is successful that we have met actually have that one characteristic on them.
Totally. Definitely. Like sharing. There's something about the compassion woven into the gesture. And like you said, the intention there, you can tell when it's pure. Just like you can tell when somebody's trying to rip you off in the street.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, even if it sounds like a thing, saying like, oh, I need to help my grandmother or something. It's bullshit immediately because we're all human beings, like I said, and we read each other. Or when it's absolutely true, and you'd have to be like a psychopath to say no at that point if you knew it was totally true. Like, can you help my grandmother get in the car? And you're like, no. you know, like
Oh, be
totally, you'd
horrible.
have to be psycho. And so that's the thing when people really share something in their heart. But you know what? I think that really what it comes down to is most of the people that I've ever worked with that are really successful know when to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
know know how to share something that's actually genuinely from inside of them, but without compromising themselves so that they're like in trouble. You know, it's like I'm like if I shared a real story about my family, there's nothing you can do with that information to leverage it against me. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that I should then never share. You know what I mean? It's like actually having something that is true, and then you magnify that truth for everybody to see it, and it shows a vulnerability that's like, oh, okay, they're letting me in, they're telling me something that I can actually use in my life, or feel something or apply it to myself, because it's just a human story. I mean, again, it's why it's so difficult when you're talking to people who want to accelerate the process. It's and for me as well, when I was in my 20s, it's so difficult because it's really the simplest shit is the most important. You know, like if you memorize every EQ point on a 1073, that won't give you a hit. But the willingness to actually cry or be gentle when you're like recording Nora Jones, or really feel something, like get your ego out of the way and really be able to hear it for what it is, instead of filtering it through your own projections and hopes and desires. It's like that's the type of shit that Rick Rubin talks about, that people laugh when he doesn't know it. He says he doesn't know anything about music, but when he gets his ego out of the way and he gets everything out of the way and he can really hear, is this good or is this not good? And that's, I mean, that's why I tell people that they were already qualified when they're like 6 years old. They were qualified to produce records, and then they go and fuck it up for the next 30 years. And then you get back.
Oh my God, we
Oh,
lost
something happened.
connection.
Okay,
Right. And then
sorry.
you get back to it afterwards, which is really true. Because you know what producing is? Producing is like when my daughter was 6 years old and I would play a rock record and she would go and make a mad face and like air guitar. It's like, okay, you're reading the gesture perfectly. Or I would play something beautiful with strings and a woman singing, and she would like do this like Disney dance, you know, where she's like floating in the clouds. It's like, this is production. That means that exactly the core of what is being said by this music, not the lyrics, not the artist, what they told you outside or on the phone or in a text, but what the song is actually saying to this little kid's heart, is exactly what you should be using. That information is what you should be using to mix it, to record it and mix it and produce it. 100%.
And for example, in the part of mixing, how do you enhance the song to be relatable to some specific targets?
Well, when there's a target, meaning like if we know it's going to be the single and they're going to push it for radio and streaming and blah blah blah, like all the places that records come out, then definitely there's a particular tilt, like frequency wise. There's a particular presentation that's going to make it more or less appealing. Like if you want it, when you know that it's going to get mastered and it's not going to actually be able to get louder and softer so much, then something that I'll do is have the mid-range information change in the chorus so it does sort of appear to get bigger. Like if you have a lot of mid-range arrive in the choruses and it feels wider, you know, because everything mid-range intensive happens hard left and hard right in the choruses, and we wind up with something that's like, okay, that feels louder now, even though the needles are like pinned the whole time because it's mastered super loud. You can use frequencies to give the illusion of loud and soft. And so during the mix, I'll choose something, some element that the mids are really good. If it's a guitar thing, obviously the guitars are like guitar overdubs that are stereo, and or the backing vocals or whatever's appropriate, a synth, and something that only happens in the chorus, only. And when that kicks in, it'll have a mid character that's a little bit more forward, possibly, than whatever I was using in the verse as the primary instrument. And so it makes it feel like it's stepped towards you rather than just getting louder in an amplitude sense. Like the meter, again, the meter doesn't get any louder when it's already up at zero. but there's something about the frequencies bending towards the mid range that it starts kind of yelling at you a little bit. And to me, that's one of those tricks. If the idea of the song is that the chorus gets really, really big, if it's not, and it's supposed to just get really, really wide or fat or dreamy, or the bridge is more swirly with delays or something, it's like just looking at whether the contrast between the sections is dramatic enough, right? Because otherwise it's just like taking the subway to work isn't as exciting as taking the roller coaster at Coney Island, right? And that's because there's a shape to it. Like I don't need it to just go straight across. That's like my commute to work. That's
Yeah,
just straight.
yeah, that's right. That's
But
right.
if we're trying to give people a ride here, there needs to be dynamics or the illusion of highs and lows, you know?
That's
Again,
actually
it's
great.
represent.
That's true. That's true.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so I'm going now with questions from the community. I told you I talked a lot, so sorry for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A lot.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, and so we have here Alex Sanchez, please. You use the pull tag in a special way. Tell us a bit more about ticks and configurations with bass.
With bass.
With bass, yes.
Yeah. There's, for me, the best tricks with bass is a little bit of drive. Even if it's supposed to be interpreted as clean, you can put some drive in parallel and low pass it so that it doesn't sound like distortion. Because it's amazing how little you have to compress when you have some drive and then a low pass filter on it. And it evens out all the notes as well, because you have harmonics on the low strings, and it's a square wave basically, but that low pass filter keeps it from sounding fuzzy, you know, even if it's supposed to be sounding clean. And I'll bring that in parallel next to the bass. The other thing is I personally, it drives me crazy when people talk about like these little compartments where it's like the low end is here and then you have to EQ to make space for the kick drum and blah blah blah. Like it's not true. Because there's really like the kick drum only happens for an instant and the bass is playing legato, so you wind up with these little instants where the bass pushes, excuse me, the kick drum pushes the bass out of the way, and you just make shapes that work together, meaning a little bit of snap on the kick drum or whatever, again, whatever's appropriate. But I think as far as tricks go, I think it's don't be afraid to use something that's more distorted than you think the song needs, but then using a low pass filter to make it sound not distorted. So you wind up with one kind of square wave track, but without any of the drive up at the top end. So it doesn't go zzz, you just hear like the to it, you know? And I mean, for me, that's one of the tricks is driving the bass, but with a low pass filter. There's actually a plugin called the Low Ender, which the guy modeled my bass chain that I used on a lot of records, which is the DBX 120, the subharmonic synthesizer, but with a drive and a low pass filter. Like he has a sweepable low pass filter all in one plugin. And so that one actually has an octave down, but with drive on the octave down and then a low pass filter. So again, it doesn't sound like distortion. It just sounds almost like you put a bass synthesizer that plays exactly what the bass is playing, and you can put the fader wherever that needs to be so it doesn't reveal itself. People can't tell why the bass is so consistent and has lots of low end in it.
Thank you, man.
Thank you, Joel. We have another question. I have to translate this one. So give me a second. Yeah. Which is the technical and creative focus that you use when you are mixing or producing projects that combine analog and digital elements, and how do you achieve to keep the identity coherent for each artist?
All right, so two parts. The technical aspect of it is that I basically just choose analog and digital for their strengths. Like I said before, if there's a fab filter, we'll do 10 little notches on a vocal to get like a resonance if it was in a booth or wherever. If somebody recorded it in a hotel room and sent it to me to mix, it's like I'll notch out some of the weird room resonances in the low mids, and then I'll get something like, you know, something like 6.3K, right? When you put a big shelving EQ in the top end, and so it's at 16K and you've turned up a lot of it, it's like shining a light on something. And if I shined a light on the rack behind me here, there'd be certain things that have like a dark faceplate that wouldn't get too bright. And then there'd be like some white knobs that got too bright if I put a lot of light on it. And so putting this 12K shelf on it, it's like I can bring everything up and then I can listen to what's annoying in the voice once I bring all the air up. And it's kind of a good trick to be able to use the EQ to reveal what's a limitation in the vocal, let's say. So I'll use something analog, like a Pultec, to turn up 12K, like a ton of it, way too much. And then while it's turned up like crazy, when I'm like shining the light on it like that, then I can make a couple notches at 3.2 and 6.3 and maybe 8K or something annoying up there. And then when I chill out the Pultec, the voice is much warmer sounding. The voice, I can make it louder without it hurting my eyes when they sing an E in the chorus or something, or the S's don't bother me. I don't have to compress it as much. But I'm using that Pultec in the analog domain just to crank the high end for a minute. Like I said, it's like shining a light on it to look at the details and then bringing that light back down to a reasonable level. So technically, I'm just saying that I'll use what's strong in digital and strong in analog. And as far as the identity of the artist, can you tell me how it was questioned, what the question said again? Like how to retain or preserve the identity? Something
Yeah,
like,
she said, "How do you manage to keep the sounding identity coherent for each artist?"
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I mean, artists usually have identity coming in, and hopefully what we do is take a look at what's, again, it's like the gear. We look at what's strong about the artist and hopefully put that in the forefront. Um, Meaning, if the idea of the band, like if they've never made a record before, it's actually more difficult because we need to take a look at what is the identity that we show the world, and we're starting from nothing, so we sort of are inventing an identity. But if you're working with a legacy artist, I can look at everything that some legacy artist has already recorded, like a Nora Jones. We know a million songs by her that I've heard when I'm in like an elevator at a hotel. So if she's singing something, then I knew how to judge that. Like, does this sound like Nora Jones? And what's interesting is you can use that information to think of it as a new artist. Like, okay, there's a new artist, and you say, does this sound like you? And the more you talk to them about what the identity is, it's like, is this their brand? And I mean, this is the hard part, because really what we're talking about here is a branding exercise, like, and making something consistent with the way they look and the way they sing and the noise they make when they are in front of a microphone. Like, if there's somebody who screams and you're like, this is going to be the new Celine Dion, then you got it wrong. But if it's somebody who screams and like the band backs them up and it's really aggressive and you're like, this is going to be the new Slipknot, then maybe you're on to something here, and you start working towards making it the best it can be within this aggressive zone. And I'm using extreme examples because it illustrates the point, but there's subtle examples, like, is it Deftones or Slipknot, or is it slightly Nora Jones or slightly Celine Dion, or is it Whitney Houston, or is it uh, Billie Eilish? Like, what is this person supposed to be? Because it's really them. Number one, it's them. And number two, we have to say the three most evil words in the music business if we're talking about actually being on a label, which is path to market. Because if you know the path to market, that means the A&R person has an easier time selling the project. It means that a lawyer will have an easier time getting that project signed. Because if they go, I understand this, we can sell it to every single kid who's wearing a Metallica shirt. Because it's not Metallica, but I understand why every single person would like this. the same way that there's a path to market for something more obvious, like something that's like Coca-Cola, but with more caffeine or less caffeine or no sugar, and you have Diet Coke all of a sudden. I use that example on purpose, obviously, Julio. but but basically, it's like it's exactly that. There has to be a path to market, and it's amazing when you start to feel like you understand the person, you understand what's strong about their music, and then from there you can start making tiny decisions. Again, it's $1 at a time in the box. You make these tiny decisions that help to guide every song on the record or the EP, or every sound on the single is like, okay, we're going to put synths in this because as a new wave singer and your look and all of this stuff, you sound better in that context. Instead of being like the lightest, most chill metal band in the world, you become the most aggressive new wave band in the world. You know, like you really stand out in one context, and in the other context, you get lost in the crowd.
Yeah, man.
I hope that
Yeah,
answers that.
yeah, I hope I hope to. My friend, we're running out of time, but I have two more questions. This is
Okay.
going to be very
Should I
easy.
keep it quick?
Huh?
Should I keep it quick, or we're good?
Yeah, it's very, very easy.
We're good.
When
We're
are
good.
Okay.
you coming? When are you coming to Colombia?
As soon as possible, obviously.
But when? When is soon?
And I don't know. I do hope soon. I'm talking to a few people, but I hope soon. Obviously, like we're gonna hang out in Bogota. That's number one.
That's my second question. What is the
Okay.
first thing that you're going to do when you come to Bogota? We're going to be with David with at the airport. Yeah.
Waiting
Yeah,
for you
right. Of course.
with the
Of course.
cardboard.
Number one is go to crepes.
Yeah,
Crepes.
it's near, like 3 blocks away.
Yeah, of course. On the 93rd Street Park, man. The best crepes in the town is the one at the Park 93.
Yeah, it's great. So thanks a lot for to all the people that have connected. Remember that you will be able to find this podcast, this streaming, this live as a podcast on all streaming platforms. It's really easy. You just go to the platform you prefer listening to podcast to, and you search "Produciendo con Julio Monroy." It's in Spanish, obviously, because you know, and you'll be able to find these episodes and also all the past episodes. So, Joel, thank you a lot
Yeah, man,
for being here with us. I think you said a lot of valuable things. I actually
a
like the
lot.
ship. Do you have a ship, like a ship, a little ship on top of the gear?
Yeah, there's a boat right there. Yeah, or whichever
That's
side. I
amazing.
can't
Yeah, I
which
just,
side is it?
I just looked at it and I was thinking like, okay, like you have all these things that call your attention on
And
that
a ship.
wall, and you just got like a random ship on top of it. That's amazing.
Yeah,
Wow,
there you
Thank
go.
you.
beautiful,
That's great.
It says Cape Cod.
That's
beautiful.
great. That's great. So, do we have any other announcements?
No, well, I want to say you thank you, man. Thank you for the time, for everything. I was at Studio G last week, and we made an interview with Joel. I think that it would be live in, I guess, in 1 week. Okay, it's going to be a
Awesome.
great video, man. Uh,
Guys, really
Thank you, man.
sincerely for asking me to come on. It's really fun.
Yeah, we're going to make some reels or of this talk if
Mm,
it's okay with you,
of
and
course.
post it on Instagram.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, guys. And thanks everybody for watching.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jorge, Ian, Alex,
Mhm.
Digidosis, 96, Andrea, Natalie, everyone. Thank you for everything. And okay, so please stay here, Joel.
Mhm.
And we're going to have a live stream in 15 days with Rafa Sardina. Okay, so stay tuned. Bye bye.